Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Micah, this is Winston. As always, we're just going to dive right into it. This is Attack of the Dead Men, Sabaton History. Now, if you guys haven't watched it yet, we already did the actual music video. Well, actually, it was a lyric video, if I'm not mistaken. But, because I think the only music video that is actually attached to it is them doing it live. But, which is still a pretty good video. But, in case so, this is the actual story behind it, because actually I was really curious about it. But, in case, let's go ahead and just dive right.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Pat from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History. There are a lot of legendary tales that came out of the Great War.
Yeah, and the song Attack of the Dead Men talks about one of the most legendary.
And the strangest.
And the most legendary.
Yeah, but the strangest.
And maybe most legendary.
So yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm pretty sure the majority of the people who are watching this obviously know the story. But for those who don't, like my little friends and family, if you don't know, pretty much this is where World War I, this is the Eastern Front. Germany, I'm pretty sure this is like fresh, like they're just now starting to use gas warfare on the battlefield. And so what they do is they're sieging a fortress, and what they decide to do is gas the Russians that are there. The Russians have never been gassed before, if I'm not mistaken. At least these Russians haven't, and so they don't even have gas masks or anything. So whenever they get gas, I think right after they get gas, they charge the Germans. And right after they get on the other side, through pretty much the thick fog of chemical gas, it pretty much just strips, like starts melting their skin. It's like a pretty much like a airborne, acts like an airborne acid almost. It like just makes them look like zombified, like nasty. You know, they're in a lot of agony pretty much. And if I'm not mistaken, the Germans actually got scared from this because they thought that they were actual zombies running towards them, or undead men. I'm sure, because I don't think zombies were a thing back then. But yeah, just one of those things, kind of scary. But let's go ahead and get into it.
Osowicz Fortress was built in the late 19th century on a strategic hotspot near the river Biebrze in what is now Poland, but back then was the Russian Empire. It was just about 50 kilometers away from East Prussia, though, along the important railway line from Bialystok to Königsberg, which conveniently ran straight through the fortress. So it's kind of obvious why this was quite a headache for German high command in the Great War. This close to the German border, and effectively controlling one of the few railway lines through all the bogs and marshes in the area, the fortress had to either be taken or destroyed. Otherwise, it would prevent any advance into northern Poland. In fact, the Germans had tried to take the fortress back in September 1914 and again in February 1915, where
I was about to say, if that's the case, then obviously we can see that that was most likely a very, very high strategic point where obviously they're not going to just stop or make it just a huge siege of attrition and just try to bog that down. No, they want to get that out the way. So obviously that was a huge point of contingency for them.
the second attack had severely damaged much of the fortress defenses through heavy bombing, but the main defensive ring had nonetheless held long enough for the Russian counterattacks to force the attackers to break off. By the summer of 1915, though, the Kaiser's army was determined to try again. Now, August von Mackensen's Gorlice Tarnov offensive that summer had thrown much of the Russian forces on the Eastern Front off balance, and German and Austro-Hungarian forces advanced on a wide front eastwards. Seeing their chance, German high command wanted to also take Poland in a frontal attack and ordered Generalfeldmarschall Paul von Hindenburg on the offensive. Osowicz Fortress was an important prize to take from the weakened Russian army. So 12 German infantry battalions, accompanied by up to 30 heavy artillery pieces, set their sights on Osowicz. The core of the Russian defenders, under General Lieutenant Berzhozovsky's command, was made up of around 500 men from the 226th Infantry Regiment Zemlyansky, supported by several hundred militia. They dug in several lines of defenses and redoubts, trying to give the German artillery as small a target as possible.
Yeah, but even then, you can still tell, even seeing in these pictures, that how poorly equipped they were. I mean, obviously, this is early in the battle, early in the war, and we can. This is super evident in the fact that these men are fighting with freaking caps on. You know what I'm saying? Not even helmets or anything, like literally caps. So you know what I'm saying? Like that on top of like nothing. They're literally fighting in clothes. They have no armor, no nothing, and they have no gas mask. So it's just kind of crazy to see what they were kind of thrown into. And it almost kind of gives you a picture as to maybe why they were just like kind of destroyed as en masse as they were. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep going.
But once the assault began, much of the fortress walls, barracks, and towers began to crack under the heavy German siege artillery. But artillery alone won't take the fortress. They would still need the infantry for that job, and the Russians had enough machine guns and defensive works to make that very difficult and very costly.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much armor you had on, especially in these times. Those machine guns were retarded. You know what I'm saying? They were ridiculous. So it was nothing stopping it.
The Germans, though, brought in a fairly new and extremely dangerous weapon: gas. Now, gas warfare was fairly new. In 1914, the French had used tear gas, and in early 1915, the Germans had first used poison gas at Bolimov, though that failed. Since then, however, it had had a devastating effect on the totally
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, early on though, too, using gas was like it was like such a risk on your own men too, because unless it was like a dead silent, or either one or two conditions had to be. It was either no wind and it was just like dead, like what I'm saying, you could hear a freaking cow mooing like 2 miles down the road, or it had to be wind going directly towards your people, and you had to pray to God that that wind didn't change direction, because if it came back on your own people, I mean, gosh damn, what a leg up you just gave to your enemy. But yeah, that's why, if I'm not mistaken, it wasn't used that super heavy on early on, until they finally got a handle on how to use it correctly. But yeah,
prepared and ill-equipped Russian soldiers who died gruesome and horrible deaths in the deadly clouds of gas. Without gas masks to protect themselves, the defenders of Auschwitz were expected to suffer the same fate. In the early morning of August 6th, as the winds were finally favorable, the German gas batteries opened up. A dark green smog descended upon the battered defensive works. The wave of gas crept over the Russian lines, creating a death zone. The gas used was made out of a mixture of chlorine and bromine. While the bromine acted as a respiratory irritant, the chlorine attacked the lungs, chemically burning them, right? The chlorine attached itself to moisture in the air, turning it to hydrochloric acid, which then bit into the membranes and flesh of the lungs, aggressively.
yeah, along with the outside of their appearance, giving them that, again, zombie-like appearance. But again, zombies weren't, if I'm not mistaken, zombies weren't a thing until like the 1960s, until Night of the Living Dead. That's why that's like became such a huge cult classic. Or actually a little bit before that, if I'm not mistaken. But around this time, there was no such thing as a zombie in the media. So these guys just look like dead bodies coming, running towards them, and that is had to be the creepiest looking thing ever. But
dissolving the soft tissue. The Russian soldiers were literally choking on their own blood, as every breath they took destroyed their lungs. Unable to breathe, they died in agony, coughing out bloody lumps of their own lungs. But it was not only the lungs that suffered, as the acid attacked the soft tissues of the eyes and noses, burning them chemically as well. The soldiers burned from the inside out. Many died within the first few minutes. Those further away from the initial attack tried binding wet rags and urine-soaked shirts around their faces in a desperate attempt to protect themselves, but that often helped little. Everything the wave of gas came in contact with began to die. Leaves and grass turned yellow and black. It killed the insects and the animals in the woods. There was no escaping, as the gas crept into every ditch and into every hole, even attaching itself to the brass of guns and shells. The defenders suffered heavy losses, and whole companies in the foremost trenches were simply wiped out. Only around 100 men in the defensive lines further back survived, still terribly burned. As the gas dissipated, The German infantry battalions formed up. While other units went to secure the railway line, it was up to these 7,000 men of the German 76th Landwehr Division to storm the main defensive lines in front of the fortress. Confident that most of the defenders had been wiped out and that the few left would be overcome with ease, the German infantry moved onwards. The first lines were indeed littered with only the dead, grotesquely deformed in their final moments of inevitable death. The end. Or was it? As the German troops moved onward over the shelled-out ground, they suddenly came under heavy fire. The fortress artillery opened up on them, and machine gun fire tore holes in their ranks. Further out on the flanks, the last Russian reserve companies coming up from the rear formed to counterattack the German infantry. Seeing those friendly reinforcements rush in with their bayonets attached, the 100-odd survivors in the trenches also emerged. Bayonets fixed, they stumbled like zombies out of their dugouts, crawling and limping their way into the open.
Yeah, which is either A, obviously they had, they were just swelled up with patriotism and just thought to themselves, we might as well go ahead and go out with a bang. Or they just really did not understand the depth of their injuries and what just really happened to them. You know what I'm saying? They probably felt like pain, immense pain, but they were thinking like, obviously we don't have a mirror or anything, so we don't understand the full, what really just happened. And I'm sure if they saw themselves in the mirror, they would probably die from shock. So, let's see.
Complete shock stopped the German attackers dead in their tracks. Like dead men returning to life, the Russian survivors came on, heavily breathing, gasping for air through destroyed lungs, their faces scarred by chemical burns, half hidden with bloody rags. They marched on, thirsting for revenge for the terrible fate thrust upon them. Their tears were bloody, their eyes burned red. They spat blood and parts of their lungs as they advanced, croaking and coughing like the living dead. This horrible sight, as well as the unexpected counterattack, halted the Germans, and a deep panic set in. They hastily withdrew, soon running away in terror as the panic spread through their ranks, pushing their comrades aside, trampling over each other, stumbling over barbed wire as Russian artillery shells fell in between them. The attack of the dead men came on, accompanied by a bayonet charge of the reserves, and recaptured the lost trenches. By 11 a.m., a few hours after the deadly gas attack, the defensive lines were back in Russian control. The Germans had withdrawn back to their own starting positions. Okay, much of the battle remains shrouded in legends and mystery, and that is likely to remain so. The casualty numbers on either side are unknown, as are the German records of this battle, though it was certainly a well-deserved tactical victory of a small Russian.
I mean, just like anything that happens in Russia's past is unknown, but I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, damn, I wonder what happened like directly after. Like, what did the Russian high command, or what did the Russian counterparts, or brothers think whenever they saw that, and they think to themselves like, what the hell we have to do something to so that this doesn't happen again. This is just horrible. But I don't know, just one of those things where I kind of wish that we could go back in history and see for ourselves. But
force over a much larger German force. Strategically, it did little to preserve the Russian hold on Poland, and Ossowiec's fortress had to be given up weeks later as it was too damaged and the whole front had to pull back anyhow. And since, after the Russian revolutions of 1917, this war was viewed by the Soviet Union as a capitalist war and a source of shame. It was largely edited or written out in their history books. Nowadays, post-Soviet Union, however, the legend of the attack of the dead men is gaining more attention as Russia's interest in the Great War increases. And the legend is certainly a tale worth telling. That is beyond dispute.
Well, I mean, yeah, because that's the only time in history that we know of that that's actually happened. Because I mean, obviously that never happened ever before this. Because gas and stuff like that wasn't available to use, which would have been. Could you imagine seeing gas in like the Napoleonic Wars? That would have been insane. Like, oh my gosh, ugh, that would have been so much more bloody. But yeah, just one of those things where you just think about when I guess you're into history like that. But let's kind of get back to it.
The whole song "Attack of the Dead Man," it was one of those like super like, okay, we're gonna do an album about World War One.
Yeah.
And when I was presenting the idea to our record label Nuclear Blast, they were like, okay, so you're gonna have a song about gas? And I was like, yeah, sure, there will be a song, such song. We didn't know exactly how we're gonna cover it, like in which area, but the story of the dead man was one of the absolutely like most legendary ones that we definitely felt that we needed to get in. And then that's the Auschwitz fortress. That's where we get in the.
Have you been
gas. No, I never been there, but we have received a lot of fan mails saying like, this is something you really should write a song about. So in the end we did, and we had a little bit of a special way of revealing the song to the fans, because in Russia there's this guy who is famous as Radio Tapok. He's got a very popular YouTube channel. He's a touring heavy metal musician who does cover songs of bands like Sabaton, but he translates them into Russian.
Okay.
So I asked him, would you be willing to do a song which nobody has ever heard? And do it, you translate it into Russian,
Yeah.
and you release it before us. And he was like, that's a weird thing.
It's
I
cool,
never
though.
heard about it.
Sounds kind of cool though.
Yeah, so he before anybody has heard the song,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because pretty much they're giving him the copyrights almost to it. It almost seems like, because he's the one who's releasing it first. Which, if I'm not mistaken, no, because you actually have to get the copyright on it. I don't know, but in any case, it was pretty cool of them to do that, and I'm sure that they did it out of respect, because this was that type of a Russian thing. Which, remember, when we're covering Russian things, we also have to remember at the time, Russia was Ukraine encompassed Russia, so there was most likely Ukrainians in that battle too. So we're not just praising Russia's victories here; we're praising Ukraine's as well. But I just had to get that out because I know somebody was thinking it. But
he heard it, he recorded it, he translated it into Russian, and he made a music video for it and put it out. I think that was interesting way. A lot of people said I'm crazy when I come with such a marketing idea.
I mean, you could have sued him for millions of dollars.
Yeah, that could have been. That could have been the case. Like, hey, you stole our song.
You told me. Why would I tell you to?
But we actually gave him the song, and it was very popular, and he did a good job. And maybe we can listen to a little bit of Russian version of it.
I hope so. Now, since people were asking you to write lots of stuff about the First World War, and you've got, about the Red Baron and Lawrence of Arabia, which one was the topic that most people asked you to write a song about?
About World War One.
Yeah.
And the most requests are for the Christmas truce.
Aha, okay.
Funny enough. But we didn't have a song that fitted to it, so we couldn't get it in. But second most wanted song was Attack of the Dead Man.
It's interesting because I didn't know that story before I started writing The Great War, but I'm a historian, and you think, but it's really the last few years it's become so much more. People know so much more about it and stuff.
And guess where I found out about it, mainly.
Oh yeah, okay.
From you.
And I mean, I think that's mainly because when done with like World War One stuff, I think we usually dive more on the Western Front than the Eastern Front. If you think about it, just like in World War Two, we're kind of dive more in the Eastern Front than the Western Front, just because there was so much more going on at the time. Like in World War One, when we think about the Eastern Front, we just think of German dominance and that one, pretty much Russian offensive that just finally did something. But other than that, it was just German dominance. So you kind of don't really tend to focus on that. When you focus on the Western Front, it was literally a huge back and forth stalemate. So I think that's why we focus more on that, where what I'm saying, and that's probably why this story wasn't as covered popularity wise, because I mean it's a fantastic story just on the everything alone, just the fact it has zombies in it. But I mean, quote unquote, but it's just one of those things where just circumstance. But let's see.
You. So
That's my job.
well, we have the fans as well, but where we were looking for information about it was mainly from you.
Huh. Well, it's nice that I can change the world one person at a time, or one metal band at a time. Now, I mentioned before in the history bit that there's not a lot of specific history about this specific battle. Like, there's so many things we don't know because so many of the records were destroyed or mislaid or intentionally destroyed during the Soviet Union, because World War I was not a patriotic war. It was the imperialist war.
It's the problem that we often face. People say, "Oh, here is a story," and then you can't find the proper information about it. These days, it's so much easier. But I mean, going back to the beginning when we started to write about it, it was not easy for us to find information.
Sure.
I mean, people who are into history, people who are historians, they know where to search, where to find. They have the networks to find it. We stand in the beginning absolutely alone. We didn't even have the fans.
Yeah, because if I'm not mistaken, for the most part, when you do research like this, and this type of thing where not a lot of people on the internet are doing that same type of research, it is super hard to find. And I think the main resources that you have to go to are different universities around this, especially around the surrounding area, because they usually will put in that work, that extra time and years of work to do the extra research. And then all you really have to do is just go to them and go to a local library or to that professor or whatever, and you just do your research. So but yeah.
So I'm thankful for where we stand now, where we have good contacts like you, for example. Very good reference for World War One.
Historians like Marcus and Vika and stuff that
Say
hi, guys. There you go.
They're our awesome team who can help us with coming up with the information. But in the beginning, it was really difficult.
Well, you mentioned the Christmas truce, and people asked a lot during the Great War, and they still ask, they're like, well, did they try anything like that on the Eastern Front? Because the Christmas truce was on the Western Front. And they're like, yeah, how come there was nothing like that on the Eastern Front? There's a very simple reason why there wasn't on the Eastern Front.
Orthodox.
That's the truth. Some Russian soldiers did try an Easter truce in 1916. They came out of their trenches on Easter, to start the same sort of thing. And they were all shot at and taken prisoner by the Germans and the Austrians because they used a different calendar. And it was 13 days different, so it was not Easter to the Germans and Austrians. They just saw a bunch of Russians walking out of their trenches for hanging out and going, hey, come on, here's some drinks. And shot at them. I wouldn't have shot at them.
Yeah, because the Russians didn't switch to the Gregorian calendar until freaking late into the early freaking 19th century. That's why I think everybody's so confused on the October revolution and stuff like that, because technically it happened on November 5th or something like that. It totally messes up the entire historical calendar when talking about 19th century Russia, really, because their dates are so far apart. But yeah,
drinks are drinks.
Yeah.
Never look a free drink in the... Well, that doesn't make sense. I'll shut up now. You can edit that out. So what are you doing?
I'm having drinks.
Drinks. All right. Well, since it's drinking time, I guess it's time for us to say goodbye, Per.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for everybody for watching this episode
of Sabaton History.
Listen to me, everybody. We love the Sabaton History channel. If you do it, please share it with us. Support it on Patreon, YouTube, and any way you want. Thank you for your support. Let's do this forever.
Alright guys, we'll go ahead and end it right there. So yeah, definitely an insane story, and I'm glad that they are grateful, really, that they put in the work to find all the information and stuff like that, because finding information that, you know, isn't just out there, or, you know, doing the research to find information that isn't relatively out there is really hard, because like I had to do it whenever I did my greatest generals from each country video, because nobody has ever done a freaking web page where they tried to do, you know, put that as a list. So I had to literally research like 300 and some freaking countries worth of, it was insane. But so I totally understand it. I'm sure it just gets harder from there the more obscure you get. But in any case, so if you guys like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys on another one. I'm out.